I was just getting my instructions from Congressman Hoyer. We are certainly very blessed in this country to have the leadership of Congressman Hoyer. And I need to say that from the beginning. We think we have the most effective congressman in the 5th Congressional District for what he does for the people of Maryland and for the people of his district. But Maryland has given a great national leader in Steny Hoyer to this country. And he speaks with passion, and he speaks his views, and he really lays it out the way it is. So I'm very pleased to have him introduce me. If you ever want to have somebody introduce you, have Steny introduce you. He always does a great job. And Maya, thank you for your leadership in the global policy solutions, and we are very fortunate to have a person of her extraordinary talent taking on this challenge. So Maya, thank you for everything you do. And Henry, we appreciate your leadership in the Insight Center for Community Economic Development. I want to just talk a few moments about some of the issues. Thank you all for being here today. You've heard the numbers, so I'm not going to repeat the numbers that Steny just went over on the wealth disparity, but it starts off with the wealth disparity in America. 1%, the top 1% hold 37% of the wealth of this country. That's not the type of opportunity that we should have in America. And when you take a look at it based upon color, you're absolutely right. It's not only unacceptable, but it's growing in the wrong direction. It's growing in the wrong direction. We should be narrowing the gap, whereas the gap is still widening in America. When we look at retirement savings, an issue that I've been very much involved with, Latino and African Americans, 2/3 have no retirement funds whatsoever. That doesn't bode well for the future of this country. So we need to do something about it. When you look at mobility, those in the lowest quintile, their chances of moving out of the lowest quintile into the middle class and up the wealth ladder is more difficult today than it was a decade ago. So thank you for holding this conference. Thank you for doing this. This is what we need to be talking about as a country. So I'm going to be talking about one of the tools in order to get us out of this spiral, the wrong spiral. Because government needs to be a healthy partner in answering this question. All levels of government. But let me talk about the federal level of government, the government that I'm responsible in part as a member of the United States Senate. We fight so hard for federal funding in education. Why? Because education is the great equalizer in America. The great equalizer. So we want funding from the early childhood education programs, Head Start, all the way through affordable higher education, because today so many families can't afford the great equalizer in America. Too many of our schools are failing. And the federal government has to take on an active role. That means money. That means budget support. The city in which I live, Baltimore City, there was a recent study that was financed by the Institute for Minority Health and Health Disparities at NIH. They did a study. And depending upon what zip code you live in Baltimore, your life expectancy can be a difference of a generation, 30 years. Now, there's many reasons for it. Part of it's affordable housing. Steny talked about the minimum wage. We had a vote yesterday in the United States Senate, which was disgraceful. Couldn't move forward on the minimum wage bill because of a Republican filibuster. There's not a state in this country, if you make minimum wage, that you have housing, affordable housing. Not a state in this country. No wonder you see these differences of life expectancy. Health care. Yes, we've made tremendous progress, but we still don't have equal access and equal treatment and equal research dollars done in minority health. We need the resources in order to do that. We all talk about how to give more money to NIH. NIH's budget's been frozen for 3 years. They can't make the progress that we need. And I can go through category after category with this budget restraints that we've had, where we can't invest in the type of programs that could deal with the wealth disparity in America. So let me cover one issue that I doubt many will cover today, And I want to get you involved on it. How do we get the revenue so that the government can do what it needs to do? How can we get tax fairness in America? Now, I could talk all morning about how unfair our current tax code is, how the special breaks go to the privileged. But I want to talk about something different, how we can change this tax code. But I need you engaged in this debate. Yes, you're engaged on the Head Start issues, on the health care issues. Get involved on the tax issues. Because we need the revenue to finance government. The last time we tried to change this current tax code was 1986. And the debate was similar to today. Let's spread the burden, let more people pay their fair share, and lower the rates. They passed a major tax reform in 1986, and it didn't even last to 1987 before they started messing around with it. We now have a look at, if we follow the advice on reforming this code, you have a blueprint for it in the Camp proposal that's been filed in the House of Representatives. It doesn't raise the revenue, and it doesn't provide for tax fairness. So I want to give you a different way to do this. You may have a knee-jerk reaction that I'm going to try to change. And I think we need to go to a progressive consumption tax in America. And I want to start with this premise, and think about this for one moment. Of all of the industrial nations in the world, the United States is one of the least socialized, which means we provide less governmental services than the so-called OECD countries, the industrial nations of the world. They provide much more health care and much more housing and retirement benefits than we do. So why do we have the highest marginal tax rates in the industrial world? And the reason is that America is stubborn. We think we do things right. We're the only nation that doesn't have a consumption tax to finance our federal government. And therefore, we're at a competitive disadvantage. We should have the lowest rates in the industrial world, which would help us in global competition, because we are in global competition today. There's no longer this feeling that we can do it alone. We have to compete globally if we're going to be able to have a growing economy. So we can have the lowest rates. For our corporate friends, we can have a corporate rate of 15%. That would be the lowest corporate income tax rates in the industrial world. We can have a personal income tax rate that starts at 15% on incomes above $100,000. 90% of the taxpayers would pay no taxes, 90%. The second rate would be 25% starting at $400,000. Simplified for only 4 deductions from your tax code, so you can really understand how to do it. For state and local taxes, for charitable deductions, for employer-provided health benefits and retirement benefits, and for mortgage interest deduction. Simplified. We can have a consumption tax of 10%, which would be the lowest among the industrial nations of the world. And it would start between $25,000 and $50,000 of consumption. So those families below $50,000 would pay no consumption taxes. They would get their money back immediately, either through payroll taxes or through a debit card. Simplified. And when you do this, first and foremost, you have the revenue necessary for the federal government to be a healthy partner in dealing with the issues that Congressman Hoyer talked about and that you'll be discussing today. You get the revenues. You can get the revenues. It's border adjusted, which means, unlike our income tax that has to be a burden to companies that compete internationally, you can take the taxes off the products that you put into international commerce, making American producers, manufacturers, and farmers much more competitive than they are today. It's much more efficient, much fewer taxpayers, much easier to collect, less people avoiding taxes, people understand what they're doing. It works. And it's more progressive. That is, based upon ability to pay, it's more progressive than our current tax code because of all the loopholes, all the gimmicks, all the ways that you can avoid taxes under the current tax code. If you have a little bit of money, you know how to do that. So this is not a pie-in-the-sky thought. This is a proposal that's gaining support. Professor Gratz at Yale University is working on some of the provisions. I am going to be having a bill filed this year. And I wanted you to know about it because I think it can pass. And we've got to get away from this crisis-to-crisis management. And we're applauding the fact that we were able to get a budget for this year. It's basically a freeze budget, doesn't do much for the issues that you're talking about, doesn't give you much predictability because there's 8 years of sequestration behind it. So we still have a huge budget challenge here in Washington. And if we can solve that problem with a tax code that's more progressive than our current tax code, that gives us the revenue that we need in order to finance a federal partner to deal with these issues, then we really do have a chance of making a huge dent in the wealth disparity based on color in America and the wealth disparity for all Americans. That's my goal. When I look out this room and I see the people that are here, I'm optimistic about it. You're all here because you understand the importance of this subject. You can make a difference. Dr. Martin Luther King taught us that each one of us is put on this earth to do something to make a difference. And individually, we can change people's lives. Collectively, we can bring about the change in this country that's so desperately needed for Steny Hoyer's great-grandchildren and my grandchildren. So thank you for being here. Thank you for having me, and I wish you only the best in today's conference.
Let me just say this. When I first came to Capitol Hill in 1997 as a Congressional Black Caucus Fellow, I went to work within 9 months on the House Ways and Means Committee. And I got to sit in the room with Senator Cardin and the other Ways and Means Committee members. I was just a lowly little staffer. But it was clear to me from the very beginning that Senator Cardin was a very unusual congressperson. Well, actually, let me not say that. Let me just say that he has expertise. In the words of many people, they would say policy wonk. He knows this stuff inside and out. So I give him a lot of credit for sharing that expertise with us this morning. I'd also like to thank Congressman Steny Hoyer, House Democratic Whip, because he is passionate. One of our priorities as a network is actually to focus on how to actually create jobs. And Congressman Steny Hoyer has been a leader on this effort through his Make It in America initiative, as well as being a champion for raising the minimum wage and all of the other things that working Americans need. So we're very privileged to get these two titans of the U.S. Congress here today.